Welcome to this week's edition of MDM QuickTake. I'm Tom Gale. My guest today is Mike Marks, founding partner of Indian River Consulting Group. Mike, welcome.
Well, thank you, Tom. It's fun to actually see you back in 2D, but we actually had a brief 3D experience this week.
And that's exactly what I wanted to kick today off with. There's two topics I'd like for us to touch on today. And one is the Industrial Supply Association Summit that we were at in Phoenix together as well. 700, 800 people there. Great turnout. Yeah. And the other topic I want to touch on today is sales transformation in 2023. Surprise of surprises. So let's kick off with the ISA Summit. I jotted down three things on the airplane last night coming home: traction, momentum, and innovation. Traction first, they actually had a session on EOS, the Entrepreneur Operating System. We followed that for 5 years. Many distribution companies have engaged in that and used that as their core operating system. That was a piece of it, but really beyond that, it felt to me this year, more so than last year, that there was a feeling of sort of momentum and traction that hadn't been there. You know, I think people the last 3 years have been in varying stages of trying to figure out how to get out of the quicksand that we got hit of. And some people were faster than others. It feels like from a larger industry standpoint, this conference just seemed to be a shift in how that felt.
It was easy to feel. I mean, the energy there it actually felt like the old, remember back when it was IDA and the Gary Buffington days and the thrilling days of yesteryear. When I got to that meeting, I mean, part of the reason we didn't spend much time together is it was like the band getting back together. I'm seeing all kinds of people I haven't seen in a long time. And the energy you're talking about, people were all there. They want to move forward and they were just excited. I mean, there were so many networking opportunities. It was phenomenal. It felt like the way it was supposed to be and used to be. So To me, that was a big win.
I talked with several service providers who also said that they had some of the most engaged conversations they've had in a couple of years with people. And their comments were really around that people are looking for innovative solutions. They're actually really open to how to help in their transformation process. That leads us into our next topic here that I want to talk about. 2017 we did our first conference in Sales GPS on sales transformation. We've done a lot of workshops, a lot of peer groups, events on sales process and sales model transformation. We are working together. Our teams are on the 2023 Shift Conference. That'll be in Denver, September 18th and 20th, which will be our 7th conference. I'd like to get your take on where you think the state of sales transformation is in distribution today. What are the key issues this year in 2023, Mike?
From my point of view, and again, this is probably not in the popular mainstream, but I think a lot of distributors have started the journey. We're past the early adopters. We're beginning to get widespread. And what we're finding a couple obstacles in the way is that a lot of senior distributor sales executives are like in their 50s. And the idea is that the world is no longer field sales centric, but most distributors still are, and they're old and cautious. I just had a client, but obviously not the ISA thing. They ended up having to get rid of the senior sales executive because they wanted to move forward. And that person was just too cautious and just couldn't let go of their history with field sales. And it's a big problem. The other thing that's a challenge is that most sales managers, and, I did the two things on CRM. Do you really need one? And what do you do if you're in pilot purgatory? And it generated a fair amount of conversation. But the problem with it is that everybody's looking at pipelines and all the rest of this stuff where they're forgetting 80% of the distributor sales any given month are products that customers have purchased before. And they still have all this push instead of making it easy and taking the friction out. But the interest, it was kind of funny to me that if you look at what ISA did, what they're trying to do is put new content in front of people and really engage people and get the discussions. I had, it was really funny. The biggest surprise I had was the focus on digital marketing, or at least the initial awareness. Well, obviously, we've been playing with this thing for years, but a lot of the salespeople are going like, it makes a lot of sense what you're talking about with digital marketing, but we don't do any of that. Right. And it's not having the marketing communication guys and their MQLs, marketing qualified leads and page views. I mean, those are all vanity KPIs that don't do anything. But modern digital marketing is they find leads and feed them to the sales force that are already qualified and fully vetted with information to go sell. And the marketing effectiveness is measured by the sales force. What are you doing to help me capture new customers and new business? And so a lot of the sales guys came up, actually even came up at the reception. I had a couple interesting conversations. And then I had a marketing guy come up after the second session and said, the marketing people are actually on board with this, but we're just frustrated because we don't get any resources because they spend it all on hiring more field salespeople. So, but if you look at the track that's gone on in MDM Shift, or what used to be Sales GPS, we started off with that. And by sharing the examples of what these early adopters have been doing, you can actually see the benefit now. There's this state of the art or state of the industry. There are a number of people, not just one or two. There are a number of people that have really figured this out because they've tied in the metrics. So there's no more data-free discussions and stories. And I mean, last year at the Shift conference, people shared a lot, and there's even more. I can't wait to see the some of the customer panels that you're putting together here. I think it's going to be pretty exciting. But it's not mainstream. There's still a dog's breath of people that go, the CRM is the worst thing I've ever done in my life, or the CRM changed my life and it's wonderful and I've seen the bright light. And those that are on the path that are doing it right recognize it's a change management issue. It's not buying a piece of software and realizing that it's not field sales centric, and they're not afraid to actually talk to the sales force. Those people are doing really well. And the biggest obstacle is that everybody's scared to death to change anything with field sales. Sorry, I went off on that, but it's just that I'm starting to see the thing go mainstream, and there are people that have actually figured it out. This is a journey. It's not just going to buy something, but I mean, there are people that are really solid on this. Small companies, not just actually small companies, I think, are sometimes further ahead than the big ones.
We're in this maturity cycle in this whole transformation process, and we've talked about this before. It's a larger business model transformation where it's more than just how do I redefine the roles of my sales team in terms of outside, inside, and what that looks like. And absolutely, as you describe, some of those that are a little bit further along have defined this very clear hunter role for those outside salespeople. And so it is now what they're finding is, we really need these qualified leads. We need better market information of where we target and where those hunters can go focus, and so that their hit rate is going to be as high as possible. The other aspect of this, though, that you touch on too, Mike, is it really depends on the company, because they may have invested, they may be way far along on a digital transformation, they maybe have a lot of the CRM in place, but they haven't really addressed that sales model and how they adjust that sales model to really make it more of a hybrid sales model. The other element here is also around the analytics and bringing in those to really inform, and that's where CRM can come in to really give much better metrics and visibility into where customers are spending their time and engaging and how to best serve them. But then the final piece is around the talent piece. And I think that's what we really found this past year when we put all this together in terms of an agenda and a curriculum, essentially, and flow for the conference. And what we're working on today and finalizing here over the next month is really bringing these conversations where people are pushing the envelope across each of these areas, not just in one particular area.
Can I share something specific? Well, I'm going to anyway. If I get in trouble, Brendan will rip up my arm and beat me with the wet end. But
yeah, I was just trying to process that you were actually asking me permission for something.
Yeah, I know. And I realized that was really stupid. So when I was doing the, do you really need a CRM? And we were talking about this transformation, I shared I used a PAR report that was a couple years old. So we didn't violate any super secret stuff. But in the typical ISA member has twice as many field salespeople as they have inside salespeople. But then you look at other industries that are further ahead, that's completely reversed. There's like 10 outside guys and 20 inside people, or 30 inside people. And the reason people get stuck and they can't have that discussion is they're hostage of their pay plan. right? Where they're just, I paid them a commission and they've got this lifetime annuity and they're scared to death that they'll leave, which is basically, that was the old school. And people that are doing that, you're past the best by date and may end up being dead man walking at a certain point. So,
yeah. Yeah. And I think these next 2 to 3 years, you're going to see, as you say, so much more adoption. And I think we'll get to this tipping point where the overall sales model across most distribution sectors are going to look almost upside down. It's hard to really define it because it really depends market by market and company by company. But I think we really are just in the next couple of years here going to see a. I don't know. Let me ask you this: when do you think we'll be talking about this, and we'll say, you know what, this is the year where there's actually, it feels like there's more inside salespeople in a typical distributor than an outside salesperson. When do you think that's going to happen, Mike?
25. I mean, I don't know. We're all just guessing. But I mean, if you look at the trends tend to continue. It's very hard. Peter Drucker always said, if you think about it, something, you can pretty much figure out what's going to happen. What you can't do is figure out when. Remember Bruce Merrifield talking about rocket roadsters and his field salespeople be gone by the year 2000. And fact is, we've lost 1 million B2B salespeople from 2014 to now. Basically 25% of the outside B2B salespeople don't exist anymore. They're working wherever they want to work. But as this thing continues to change, I almost felt that last year's shift, and probably it's because there were so many distributors in the room that had actually been pretty far down. I was feeling last year was the tipping point. But then you hang out with other people that weren't at the shift conference, and I didn't realize there's a survivor's bias there. But there's so many people that are still talking about it and haven't really started. And I think the tipping point is when the majority have actually started, even if they're early in the journey. But if you go back, I remember I bought a fax machine back when I was a manufacturer's rep, and my boss chewed me out for being an idiot. It was one of those old quick things with a drum. And he said, "You're an idiot." And as a young guy, I didn't know any better. I said, "Why?" And he said, "You didn't buy two. You don't have anybody to send a fax to." So, but nobody today talks about fax strategy, but back at the time it was huge. And by the way, nowadays, unless you're dealing with contractors, if you still have a fax number in your card, you're called a Triassic reptile. So there's going to be a point in time, and my guess is probably 5 years from now, maybe no more than that, we'll be talking about digital transformation, sales transformation, the same way people talk about their fax strategy, which means they won't. It's just the way things are, and everybody gets used to it.
I agree. In 2019, I would have said you're crazy if you said that distribution was going to have a more dominant inside sales than outside sales model overall. But I think given the fact that we've now been doing this 7 years and have seen the community grow to hundreds of distributors who are now really engaged and in this process, plus the fact of the accelerant of what COVID has done in terms of really making people take a look. And this goes in part in terms of what we also experienced down at ISA here this week in terms of people are really looking out to vendors and outside resources for how they can accelerate their transformation wherever they recognize is where they need to focus at a given point. So what I'm saying is I agree with you. I think it's about a 2-year process, and that's really going to be accelerated by this combination of just the technology and even AI and a lot of the automation behind the scenes that's really going to change the nature and roles of everybody in the sales process really.
Well, but see that the minority have figured it out, the majority haven't. But we always have talked about hunters and farmers in field sales, but it was very, very hard to actually execute and create that model. What technology has allowed us to do is truly separate market making from market serving. And the field sales rep, instead of being the Lone Ranger, is now the point of the spear with the whole support team. And you can't do that without digital. So we've got this new tool, and it's kind of like the old jokes you've seen that, nobody read the friendly manual, RTFM, and they're taking their F-22 down the runway at 140 knots, and nobody read the instructions. If you pull back in the stick, it goes straight up. And so we've got this technology. People are still trying to figure out what do they do with it. And so and the thing is, you can't go, everybody's used to getting a good idea, but this is not a good idea. This is making a commitment to go on a journey, and it's a multi-year journey. And those that actually deal with that have been very successful because there's a huge body of knowledge and conversation. I mean, I know you can probably be at the forefront of this in terms of bringing distributors together that have that same flat spot in their bowling ball that say, I just really want to be a leader here and play this game to win. But there's a huge conversation. If you look at Bain and you look at McKinsey and you look at Gartner and there's so many people that are putting up really good data that you can figure it out. Yeah. So, look at it this way. It's creating a lot of opportunity for little guys to kick big guy butt.
I had a couple of those conversations this week. Absolutely. The playing field is leveling quickly and yeah, there's a lot of opportunity today, and it's just going to keep getting more so.
And speed will continue to be a weapon for the next several years. Whoever gets there first, because it's all about selling the customers the way they want to buy, and they changed.
Great thought to leave it at this week, Mike. As always, thanks so much. I think you're going to do some racing this weekend.
I am. I'm actually going down to spend Friday. Normally, that's to set up the car. The car is perfectly set up. I'm just doing this to remember how to turn left and right at Daytona. Because it's the Rolex 24 track. So, but I've got like 5,000 miles on that track, and I've won a couple of races. So, if I spend a day doing this, hopefully I won't drive into a wall, because then I'd be humiliated and poorer.
That sounds like a great aspirational goal. Good luck.
Thanks, buddy. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
You as well.